I've been playing video games pretty much my whole life, and I haven't always been like a serious competitive player, but I have always been really competitive just in life. For example, I've never been the type of person that can smile after losing. If someone beats me in a video game, as long as I can remember, even if it was my brother, I'm usually pretty upset for like the next 15 minutes. I need to just kind of not say anything and just sit there salty for 15 minutes. This goes back even when I was a little kid. I hate losing. I hate it so much. And the reason that I bring that up is because I think a lot of people relate to that. I think there's a lot of gamers out there that feel and their approach to the game is a lot like mine. It's very similar. But the one thing that I've learned over so many years of playing competitively in video games is that most people really don't know what they don't know. I know that sounds really stupid when I say it out loud, but it's really true. And I think that a lot of players need to hear this. If you are the type of gamer that wants to get better at video games, and when you play, you are actively focusing, you're thinking about improving, you need to hear this. Most players in video games, and I've learned this through coaching people in Overwatch, and now also, trying to coach people in Warzone. And I'm not like a pro or anything, but I have thought about these things a lot. And I feel like the things that I share, they're so simple that I can't be wrong about them. Now, one thing I've noticed in Overwatch and Warzone is when I tell a player what they're doing wrong or what they should be doing, they always make an attempt to draw emphasis onto something else. So I would describe it like they don't really know the hierarchy of what they should be prioritizing when there is a moment of, let's say, a moment of change happening in their game. A moment of change or a turning point, I would say, in a team fight or whatnot, they aren't able to identify where the turning point was. Even if you showed them their gameplay 8 times over again, they still would struggle to identify the turning point. And the turning point is not when you lose the team fight. It's not when you take a bunch of chip damage. It could be, but most often, the turning point is when you didn't do something that would have made it easier for you in the future. For example, if I was on Soldier 76 in Overwatch and I was pushing a map on offense, and I could go left and run straight to the point where my team is fighting, or I could go right up on high ground, it would take 5 more seconds. That's it. And I would be in the best position on the whole map. That would be an example of a turning point. Most players can't identify this. Most players would say they would run to the objective instead of going right up on high ground, and then they would lose the fight on the point because they miss a helix rocket, and they would say, oh dude, I need to practice my mechanics, that's why I lost. And they would think that that truly is the reason why they lost. The problem with it is they're not even wrong, and that's why this mistake is so prevalent among so many players, is because they're actually not technically wrong. When you're playing video games, you need to be able to identify on making things easier for yourself. A good gamer, a talented player that understands the game that they're playing, makes the game easier for themselves than they do for the enemy team. Getting into position is the most important thing in any type of competitive arena that you will be in. It applies to sports, and it 100% applies to video games. It applies to wrestling, martial arts, literally everything. Getting into the correct position, fundamentals, is the most important thing. And if you are ignoring them, and if you aren't getting into the right position, nothing else will really matter. Because as soon as you play against someone that is as good as you are, if that person employs what I'm saying and you don't, they will beat you almost every single time. And I know, because I have beat so many players repeatedly, like badly. Like I'm talking, I've farmed players that mechanically are just as good as I am. Their reaction time, they're probably even better than I am in that regard. They're probably better at sniping than I am, but they don't get into the same positions that I get into. So then I beat you 8 games in a row, and I gain 120 SR and you lose all your SR. And they're salty, they're mad, they think that I'm not even good. And it's because they watch me play and they don't see, all they see is that my mechanics aren't that much better than theirs. And that, in their mind, is the whole game. And so then they say that I get lucky, blah, blah, I'm not even good, whatever. I'm boosting, whatever. You've heard it all. The reason I'm bringing this up today is because in Warzone, I've noticed the same thing. When I try and coach people in Warzone and try and teach them what they're doing wrong, they always put the most emphasis on the most recent event that happened in the team fight. For example, when I said at the start of the video, players don't know what they don't know. Players in Warzone, they don't seem to understand that when you aren't getting shot at and you aren't shooting at someone, you aren't helping your teammate. And if you aren't helping and you aren't applying that type of aggression, you probably aren't making the right play. If at the If at the end of the sequence, you don't come up behind 3 enemies and just wipe them all and get a triple kill, you probably weren't making the right play. Because in that moment, in the 10 seconds that a team fight typically lasts in Warzone, if you aren't getting, think about this, if you aren't getting shot at and you aren't shooting at people, and what are you doing, really? For that 10 seconds, it's like you don't even exist on the map. Not for your team, not for the enemies. You pretty much just disappeared into nowhere for 10 seconds. Now, if you went on a big flank or something for 10 seconds and then it was huge and you made a huge play at the end of it, that is a great play. How often do you do that? Be honest with yourself. How many times have you done that? Probably not that many times. You probably could count it on 2 hands how many times you've actually done that. However, these players will go on a 10-second window where they don't capitalize and make a big play at the end, and you'll ask them what they were doing, and they will say something that occurred near the end of the fight. For example, they'll be like, oh, dude, I had to reload. I got stuck on some weird animation. They say the most recent thing is the reason why they lost. When in reality, what about that 10 seconds where you weren't doing anything at all? What about that? Because if you were active in the first 10 seconds, it probably wouldn't have come down to the one moment that they're describing. You might have even won the team fight outright. Maybe you wouldn't even have had to make a play at the end because you would have rolled the other team if you were active in the first 10 seconds. Or maybe you would have died in the first 10 seconds, but that actually probably would have been better because then you would have drawn attention to yourself and created space for your teammates to breathe. But they will disappear and then they don't know what they did wrong, and it's because nothing occurred in that moment. So they assume that, well, I didn't die and I didn't miss a shot, so it couldn't be my fault. And this goes back to wanting to improve. Yeah, maybe it's not your fault. Who can really say? Because you might have a really aggressive teammate and maybe you aren't that aggressive. So, maybe it's really not your fault. Maybe your teammate fed. But if you want to improve, right? You want to reduce that 10-second window down to 2 seconds, to 3 seconds. 1 second, for example. This is why being aggressive in video games is it's a really good foundational building block for your own game, because it reduces that time almost down to nothing. If you are the inferior player, but you're active and you throw the first punch, metaphorically, and you get the first knock in Warzone, it doesn't even really matter if the player that you knocked is better than you, because now he's on the ground on his back. And so many players in Warzone don't understand the importance of the first strike. If you are striking first, I don't know the analytics behind it, but I guarantee you, like the odds that you win the fight, I don't know how much they improve. I guarantee you it's like at least 70%, at least. Maybe even more. The reason I bring this up is because I've been talking with some of my friends lately about improving at Warzone, trying to help them out, trying to show them where they could improve. And I'm not perfect. I can improve as well. But I've just noticed this in 2 different games now. I noticed it in Overwatch and I noticed it in Warzone. People need to focus on all of the things that lead up to the conclusion of a fight. Don't just focus on what happened at the end of the fight. Focus on everything that led up to it. It's all important. Every single part of it is important. Every reload, every step you take, everything. You have to focus on everything. So many people don't do this. 99% of players don't do this. I just wanted to make this like a public service announcement. Just please consider more. Consider more.